And greetings, everybody out there, and welcome to the pilot episode of Drinking on Mars podcast. It's Drinking on Mars, the best of Patrick Flynn, the podcast. For brevity, we'll just call it Drinking on Mars, the podcast. Now, you might ask, I am Patrick Flynn to start with, so you might ask, what is Drinking on Mars, the best of Patrick Flynn? Well, it is a retrospective release, I call it, or a look back over my life as a musician who never gave up his day job, but was continually putting out music. And this is a collection of that music from the 80s, 90s, zeros, teens and today, with a new track or a new release every week on YouTube, music with pictures, maybe a nice video, depends, somewhere in between, something multimedia. Let me just pause my intro music here. Now, what else do I say? So we'll be hearing a retrospective over the next 3 months or thereabouts on some of the music that I've made, and Spaces Ace, The Modernists, Two Keith Richards, up to Cheese and Crackers Today, The Gentle People and their Von Trapp Family Slaughterers, lots of other things. And as part of that this project, I decided to make it more than just video releases once a week. I thought, well, music is a collaborative medium, and I've never really been a solo artist in all of this years of being a musician. So I thought, pretty interesting to start a podcast, and that's as a musician and a popular musician, you're working with technology throughout the years, and popular music is so often defined by technology. So now we're kind of delving into the technology and the medium of today, which is podcasting, which is quite popular if you haven't got into it. And to those ends, I have asked as my first guest for the podcasts, Jonathan Flynn, my brother, or Jonathan F, as was his pseudonym back in the day, from the band that we formed way back in the 80s and released music in the 80s in various formats, Spaces Ace. John, welcome to Drinking on Mars.
Thank you, Pat. It's marvellous to be here.
Excellent. Well, I thought we just, after my spiel, which is interesting, no rehearsal, I thought that maybe we could just start out by, if you could tell us a little bit about Spaces Ace, how it was formed, what was it, where was it? Potted history, perhaps.
All right. Well, if I go back into ancient history, I was in a band at university from 1982 called the Neurosurgeons, and I think at that stage you were in your teenage punk rock outfit, the Secret Agent band. I think was.
Even before that, I was in year 8 when the Neurosurgeons.
Oh, okay. All right.
Formed, yeah. That was 1982, I think.
But I've gone way back to ancient prehistory.
Prehistory, yeah.
But then, that all finished, and I got a job in Canberra, and I think you ended up being in Sydney and forming a band with 2 former members of my band, the Neurosurgeons.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
While you were in Sydney.
Yes, the Astral Planes. Forgot about that.
The Astral Planes, that's right. Yeah. And then I moved to Canberra for work, but I'd also been doing a lot more with sequencers and drum machines, which were getting cheaper, and I think a lot of what was happening was a lot of the rock and roll musicians had kind of bought drum machines and realised that they hated them, and they'd sell them really cheaply secondhand, and so. And so I bought like a TR-909 from a metalhead, and I bought a Roland TB-303 from a metalhead who wanted to use it as a bass machine to practice with, but he couldn't make it work.
Wow!
He didn't get the technology.
And there's Drummatics, Roland Drummatics as well. You had one of them.
We had Drummatics, yeah. But so I was there in Canberra, not really knowing anyone, and so I just formed a kind of the thing was to have a synth pop duo. But I didn't have anyone to be in a duo with, so it was just me. And so I had a sequencer and a sampler and a couple of synthesizers and a microphone and a guitar. a silly kind of sequined Lost in Space type of costume that I'd wear. And I did a couple of cover versions, and also a couple of original songs. I think the first one was Salvador Dali Beat Me at Pool.
That's right. Yep.
Anyway, and I called the group Space is Ace, which was with a group which was just me, and it was named after a song by Frank Sidebottom, Space is Ace, and we loved science fiction and space.
I'll just put that. That's good here, but just pause to let the listeners know that I just wrote down Frank Sidebottom on my notes here as a very big influence, and obviously where the name came from. And I'll put some links in the downstairs here for some of the viewers and listeners who may not know who Frank Sidebottom is, the legendary Frank Sidebottom, and others.
An absolute giant in the world of fine art.
Indeed,
for the better word, he was an everything artist.
And do-it-yourself music. I think to put it in a contemporary fashion. I was watching a bit of Kunk on Earth on Netflix, and I was thinking, there's a bit of the Frank Sidebottom about this type of satire here, where you're absolutely taking on the form of what you're actually satirizing, but because you really love it as well.
I think the DIY thing was one of the great inspirations for Frank.
True.
So he did absolutely everything himself, and he didn't care if he had no record deal, no support, no money. He'd just do it, and somehow he'd find a way to put it out, and it was hilarious, but musical genius behind the comedy
True.
at the same time. But anyway,
Yes.
so that was me, and then I'm not sure what happened with you in Sydney, but I think it was.
I dropped out of uni that year. I dropped out of uni, my first year uni, and was just
and life was evil.
bumming around.
You had a horrible job, and then one day you contacted me and you said, "Look, I think you need me. I'm going to move to Canberra and I'm going to join your band because it's." I think you must have either seen potential in it, or perhaps you were desperate. I don't know. And I said, I hadn't thought it hadn't occurred to me. I thought, all right, yeah, sure, come on down. So you came down, and we became a duo, which was really good because it was like the synth pop duo. It was
True.
a thing.
Well, the Pet Shop Boys were very big at that time, and a huge influence on us, as much as Frank Sidebottom, I might add.
Yeah. Well, the other big influence was Devo. Devo were a huge influence.
Yeah.
And
True.
when you think of it,
I love Devo.
The Secret Agent Man. I was recalling this. The name presumably came
from the Devo song,
Secret Agent Man, which I think
even that it is a cover version. Yes, but great song from Duty Now for the Future.
Yes, but that was it. I mean, that kind of makes perfect sense of what we're all about because Secret Agent Man. When you think of it, I think it's probably from the 60s. It's like from the McCarthy era, It's like I'm a secret agent man, I work for the CIA. And Devo did their weird masks and everything like that. But they emerged from like the Nixon years when they first started out, and then they become huge in the Reagan years, I think we wanted to throw everything in. But for our music making, absolutely everything went into it.
That's very true. Yeah, there's a huge amount of satire and social commentary and politics and art and design and books and intellectualism and pop music and fame
science fiction
and rock and roll
and science fact.
Yep. That's right. Yes.
Yeah, but I think so I don't know how you describe it. I mean, you'd always have the drum machines and the sequencers and the samplers, and we liked pop music and the form of pop music and songs with choruses and melodies and that's what we tried to do, as best we could with our abilities.
Yeah, we like classic. Well, we like classic pop, classic rock and roll too. I might add, even though we loved electronic music, which was kind of the foundation, and now we conceived ourselves and the world conceived of a techno duo. Yeah. But I think the machines and the gadgetry as well as kind of there's a love of the gadgets and the technology and using that technology.
That was how the technology was how the revolution was being expressed at that time, because it was in the 1980s, It's like it's not that long since the 60s, not that long since the 50s, you know. The 1980s now is further in the past than the 1950s was to us in the 1980s. So we kind of, I think I was very much attuned to this idea that, you know, rock music and that sort of, you know, youth culture, for want of a better word, you know, was the most important thing that you had to pursue, and that you wanted to have, you know, the only way to contribute to humanity was through that. And it was you had sort of the 60s with the kind of Summer of Love and that whole kind of, you know, revolution and psychedelics, and you had the 70s with punk and post-punk.
I was going to mention
electronic music, and then electronic music is coming through with Kraftwerk. And then when we were starting off, it was like acid house was described as like the second Summer of Love. That was acid house and electronic music. You know, anyone could grab a synthesizer. For punk, anyone would grab a guitar and play. But with house music and electronic music, anyone who could just grab a synth, grab a
sampler,
drum machine,
a sampler.
And also you could steal. You could have creative theft. Well, that's what sampling was, but it wasn't stealing or it was quotation. You know, you could repurpose and collage. It's a whole new sort of type of style of music that just wasn't really possible before, you know.
I mean, just coming out with hip hop or rap in those days, the DJs, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, they were doing it with a different type of technology, with, you know, turntables and that type of quoting, to create a completely different form and express something new. I think when the sampling came out, that really mainstreamed it, and they were affordable in the same way that synthesizers were affordable in that throughout that period of the 80s as well, and drum machines and whatnot. Once I felt like CMI, you know, we'd got beyond that.
Yeah, but we had. I'm sure you recall the first sampler I got, which was the Akai S612, which is rack mounted thing. Yeah, and you press a button and sample it, and it had the two sliders where you could set the loop. But if you wanted to save it, you had to buy a second rack mount unit set on the top, which was the disk drive, and you get one disk for one sample, and you'd have to press the button to load the sample in. And,
so I'm glad you mentioned that, because that kind of is a good segue to another of the topics that I wanted to just maybe chat about, and that was, you know, as a band, as a duo with these influences, diverse influences, but we always used to want to play live as well, because that's what you do in your band, and it's, no matter what you are, playing live is still the goal, and doing gigs, and it's great fun, as we all know. So we used to have to go through this incredible library of technology to be able to replicate what we were making on our recordings, and then play them live and perform them live. And I think it was all this rack of technology. I'd be on bass and you'd be on guitar and vocals mostly, but then we had all of this technology. Do you recall what was involved in that?
Yeah, well, I had a hail damage 1973 Datsun 1200, and you'd fold the back seat down, and we had at least two and probably three, like 60 full size 60 key keyboard instruments, which was the Juno 6 and the Akai AX60. You've still got the Juno, that's right. The Akai AX60, which is a fantastic eccentric sort of polysynth, all analog polysynth. And we had the Sonic EPS at first, the full keyboard one. And we had at least one mono synth that we might bring along, which was
the Korg Monopoly.
The Monopoly.
And
then we had a rack box that had the sampler in it. At first, we didn't even have the rack box. You just carry the two.
Wasn't it the sampler? Yeah. And the sequencer was that, because everything was outboard in those days.
Yeah, the Kawai Q80. A little wheel on it and a little LCD screen. But it was like for the 80s, the late 80s, that was an amazingly capable piece of equipment. It's a 32-track MIDI sequencer.
Yep.
It was fantastic, and it allowed everything to happen.
Because you'd program all of that, and that would drive all of the synths and the samples and the bass lines that we didn't have to within the structure of that particular song.
Yeah, and it had like a 10-song memory. It had a floppy disk on it as well. So the 10 songs resident in it, you could very quickly load up more from the floppy disk. So you just select a song and hit play, and then so then you've got the musician's kind of issue. Like, the machines are machines, you know, they're not performing, and so immediately there's a certain type of musical purist who's going to,
oh, where's the improvisation or the freedom?
You just press play. You know, you're not a musician. But you know, I mean, that's like nowadays. I mean,
everybody plays to click track nowadays, and it's just a form of arranging in a way too. It's a structured arrangement.
Well, we made a point of, as we said, we as you said, we'd have guitar and bass and vocals, so there's always that performance element to it. Yeah. Then we'd also like throw in, I think, and this was in the recording and the songwriting as well. You know, we humanized it or reacted against the technology quite strongly, even to the point of doing things like we do ridiculous things like just leave the machines behind and just do I remember once we did a cover version of "Close to You" by the Carpenters. Just with
I was going to mention that. Yep.
Yeah, with all the lyrics done as spoonerisms. So that was a sort of stupid thing that we did.
That was at Tilly Devine's Cafe in Lynham. I remember.
Yeah, because I had a Burt Bacharach songbook. I worked out the chords, and it's like, well, we're just going to do it, but we're not going to do it straight. You know, no way. But that breaks up the heavy 4/4 beat and like the house music and all the samples and the crazy outer space stuff. Just hold that thought on the cover versions. I want to just dig into that, but just to close off on the live setup and the technology. The reason I remember, because you were the master of the domain of all of that technology, you used to have to set it up. So that was always tricky. You had to be there at the start of the gig. But I remember there was one time you were working or something, and we had a gig in some hall on the campus of ANU, and you drew me a diagram of everything and where every plug went into, and we had full PA as well that we ran on stage as well as the front of the house. And so I had to go use this diagram to plug every cable and every different type of cable into every hole. But it worked more or less. So that was quite amusing. Anyway, it didn't cause any trauma that's locked in my mind anyway. That must have gone. Many shows. Go on. The other thing about the technology was, as if all the music gear wasn't enough, we also had our attempt at doing visuals.
Oh that's right. Slide projectors.
The slide projectors. Now, the thing about that's a very Canberra thing, because when New Parliament House opened, while it was being built, there was a tourist centre. We could go in and look at a presentation about the building of New Parliament House. Because when New Parliament House opened, they shut it down, and they sold the audio-visual gear, and it included three Kodak slide projectors. So I bought them for like $40 each or something like that, and so the Parliament House slide projectors got into our evil hands, and we just take slides of everything and project the slides up. So we set up these slide projectors, and we'd hang sheets on the wall. But then even worse, I had my Commodore 64 computer, and I wrote some software to write slogans in wacky lettering. And so I'd bring like an old monochrome monitor and a color TV, and split the video, and have these 3-word slogans writing on the screen and with the slides going, and we'd set this whole fucking thing up ourselves. It was absolutely insane, because there's no roadies, and sometimes we didn't even have any friends, or we did have friends. That's the reason we had friends, was because we didn't make them do all this stuff. We did it ourselves. But they'd run away pretty quick fast.
My God.
It was an unbelievable amount of work and effort.
That was like he loved it. Yes, I've forgotten about that. There's a lot to it, but we got to play some great gigs, so it was all good. I was just reminiscing to someone. We played the Gershwin Room down in Melbourne at the Esplanade Hotel on tour. That was a great show, and then Ecstatic 2 at the ANU bar with early dance party to 1,000 people. So is
that the one that was sponsored by FM 104?
It might have been. I've got the flyer in one of my books. I'll see if I can dig it out and find it.
Because that was the one where I took offence at being sponsored by a commercial FM rock station. And so I led the crowd in a chant of "We Hate FM 104,"
Right,
and
okay.
and we're only going to get paid like $100 or something like that. You know, it's like,
What, they withheld our fee? They withheld our $100.
yeah. Well, he came up and threatened to. He came up and threatened to. Actually, the organizer made me apologise to the representative of FM 104, and he threatened to withhold our money. And I said, "Oh well, sorry, dude." And he said, "It's okay. I don't care." The FM 104 guy said he didn't care. Because I don't know. I mean, it was meaningless anyway. Even he recognised it was meaningless, but I had to do it. If a bridge wasn't worth burning, you know, it's not worth crossing.
If only the KLF had written their manifesto how to have a #1 hit record, absolutely for sure. A couple of years earlier, we probably would have been in a position to follow it 100% and have a #1 hit record.
We love the KLF's music, but I think their wisdom of how, I think they were able to separate the music making and performance from their kind of revolutionary idea. So they recognise that it's just impossible. It's impossible to do this in any way unless you are prepared to, you know, quarantine certain aspects of it. So your rebelliousness and your radicalism has to be quarantined. So and that way you can prolong your life as a credible artist. And even they absolutely imploded. They couldn't continue, but they stopped. They stopped for 23 years, you know, and
they actually they became irrelevant in a way.
But they couldn't. They just kept on repeating themselves. But
that's right. Who killed the KLF? Good movie. That's which I just watched recently. Just wanted to just quickly harken back to it because I think it's a slightly interesting topic. You raised the cover versions, and I just wanted to see if you remember any more of the ones that we used to do, because we used to do a lot. We do 3-set shows and stuff like that because that's the type of gigs you get. But close to you in Spoonerisms was one. I remember we did the Ballad of John and Yoko was one that we did. I remember White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane. We've done that.
We did To Sir with Love.
To Sir with Love, yep, that's right. So, I guess these are all the easy ones that we just play with the drum machine and just guitar and bass, just kind of a straight 3-piece to fill out the set.
Guitar, bass, and drum machine. But then later on we also did a quite faithful cover version of Blue Monday.
Yeah, right. Yes, that was on the tip of my brain. Cool.
That was a crowd pleaser, and it was you know, it was note for note the original 12-inch version with all the swooshy bits and the boom bits on the drum machine. You know, the kick drum.
I'd love to hear that. I don't suppose you've got any hard drive archives or floppy disks, I guess. It
was late in the piece, and we didn't do it very often. I was a bit self-conscious about it because it was just a straight copy, you know. I don't think we added much of ourselves to it. No. Not that it matters. It doesn't matter.
No, not that it matters.
We liked it. We did it.
Thinking back now, I think we should have done more of that. You know, you got to give people big signposts that tell them what to think half the time. Yeah. As Devo, I often think of this, you know, especially in terms of politics these days, that they famously sang, and they were as right today as they were then. Freedom of choice is what you got. Freedom from choice is what you want. But
you know, not
that before we get not that there's anything wrong. Whatever gets you through the night, as John Lennon sang also. Moving on. Let's just talk about a couple of the tracks from this first kind of tranche from the 80s of Drinking on Mars. And I guess I just want to talk about Red Planet, which is another one for the first Spaces Ace track. I think it's from like our first commercial release, which I believe was on a cassette release, which was essentially for our friends and for 2XX, the local radio station. I guess we recorded it on your old Tascam 244 4-track recorder, I believe.
That is correct.
And Red Planet, yes, and it was about the Soviet Union's ambitious plan in their final days, I might add. So it's really just a desperate throw of the dice to remain relevant politically with the people or something. To have a mission to Mars, go to Mars by, I don't know, 1993 or something. Not sure.
Yeah. I think the lyrics said the millennium is closing, so I think it was
That's
like
right,
1999. In 1999. That Russia would beat the Americans to Mars. That's the fictional scenario of the song.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't. I felt a little twinge of distaste when I was recalling it at first because of what's not happening in Ukraine and Russia's so on the nose of Putin. But it was different in those days, though. It was Gorbachev and Perestroika, which is in the lyrics. And it was a completely different attitude that Gorbachev was opening up. And if you had to choose, it was Reagan or Gorbachev, and it's like a different. It was
a very different time.
Yeah, a very different time, and I think and you also had the Mir space station. You didn't have the ISS; you had Mir in space.
Yes.
And you had like the space shuttle was docking with Mir in the same way that Apollo and Soyuz had a docking. So this idea that through space, you'd come together and have peace. And Perestroika is restructuring, and so I think it's
and Glasnost's openness.
Sorry,
Glasnost's openness, I believe. So yes.
Perestroika is restructuring, rebuilding. And but so that was that's the idea of the song. So again, it's space is ace. We want to hear about space.
It's about space. And it name checks a few of our favorite things. Like Love and Rockets, which is the band Love and Rockets, which was formed out of members of Bauhaus, and then Love and Rockets, the comic by the Hernandez brothers, were graphic novels, I guess they were, from the 80s, which were before we were into graphic novels, before they were a thing.
Well, it's a double reference because the lyric goes, there's love and rockets passing overhead. Rockets Passing Overhead was the name of a comic strip called Captain Star, which was weekly in NME.
Right.
And it was later made into an animation with Richard E. Grant as the voice of Captain Star too, which
excellent.
Never made it very far, but it's its own thing. But so Red Planet. It was kind of the other thing about it that I remember was we really liked 12-inch dance mixes, like the 1980s 12-inch mix. So we set out to compose it. Like this is going to be a 12-inch. And we didn't do
really
it like,
long.
But I think the way it would have been done in the olden days is you'd write a 7-inch pop song and then maybe like your producer would blow it out into the 12-inch. But I think I don't know whether some of the other sort of synth pop groups were doing it the way we did it, but we said no, the 12 inches was what it is, the long version.
Yeah. Well, of course, the Pet Shop Boys were releasing all those incredible CD 12 inches. Well, I think that would have been on vinyl. It'd been, Future House and Spectrum.
But
mega clubs.
It's got that long introduction, and I think it's we had the TR-606 as the hi-hats, but we had that's right. There was a Roland D20.
That was the drum machine.
Well.
That's right.
You had the piano sounds. And the Akai AX60 for the I don't want to impersonate it with my voice, but some of the sort of atmospheric.
There's some great sounds in there of those bleeps and beeps and the swells.
If we had a synth where you could tweak the knobs and do a bit of sound design, we were right into that. Sometimes you sit down to write a song and you wouldn't get any further than just dancing around and making sounds.
I got a lot of them. There's a lot of them. But it's got the big rousing chorus as well. So it's kind of like pump up the volume by Mars a little bit with all of the sparse, spacey bleeps and samples, and then it's got this big rousing chorus like Always on My Mind or Left to My Own Devices by Pet Shop.
And it was good to write a chorus. You just got to.
I get a little tingle when I've been listening to it lately, and so we recorded that version for Spirals for Eyes, the cassette, and then released it, and it was on the 2XX charts. It was quite popular, I thought, with the listeners. They didn't mind that track, and but that was an original version that we did. But I think the video version that we put out for Drinking on Mars is the Dr. Sex remix or re-edit. I think. Who did a later mix? No, this is the original one. Is it? Okay.
Red Planet for Drinking on Mars is the original one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That good little.
That's just you and me. That's just.
Okay. Good. Okay. Good. I'll have to dig out the Jeremy Lee Dr. Sex mix and,
yes.
see how it plays down in Warrnambool.
Yeah, it's. I think the fact that the whole thing's done on cassette. You can tell, but it's not too bad. That's all right.
Yeah, it's not too bad. When I listen to it on my sound system here in my studio with my fantastic studio monitors, sounds pretty good. Playing on YouTube to through a set of headphones or whatever. Who knows? But it doesn't matter.
We'll get Peter Jackson and his Get Back audio resources onto it. It'll sound fantastic.
Very, very good. Well, let's move on then from Red Planets and that cassette mix to the next Spaces Ace in the first bracket for Drinking on Mars, and that's Know It Now, which was recorded in 2XX studios, in an actual studio, I believe. There were more members in the band by this stage. We had Nick Wilson on keys and Neil Bateman on drums. We'll talk to them at a later stage about some later music. In fact, I might have talked to them about this when we get together again, hopefully in the future. But this was a double A-sided single with of Know It Now on one side and Statement of Intent on the other side. I think Statement of Intent was more synthy and more of a, I don't know, accessible song, but I like Know It Now because it was a bit crazier. And this is the Dr. Sex remix that's on Drinking on Mars. Yes. Tell me what your recollections of and thoughts on Know It Now are.
Well, first of all, we wanted to get serious and make a record. The cassette thing was all very well, but we wanted to have an actual record, and so
1989, I'm pretty sure it came out 1989.
Yeah. Anyway, so 2XX had an 8-track studio, and Kimmo Vanonen was the engineer. He's an experimental musician himself with some repute. He did the engineering for you, and there was a nominal rate and a nominal number of hours, and we paid the money, but the hours just blew out. And they'd let you kind of have the studio for as long as you liked, and as long as Kimmo was prepared to, have the tolerance,
indulge.
Yeah,
but it would have been overnight as well, I presume. Yeah. Overnight. Yeah.
It was pretty typical that Kimmo as an engineer was a musician himself and couldn't help but become involved and start doing it for love rather than money. So that was always nice.
Everyone's the same.
So we went in and recorded those two songs. But I think Statement of Intent, we sort of thought was a double A side. Statement of Intent was the real pounding house music one. But Know It Now is more of a punky sort of a rock song with a distorted guitar riff in it. Just 3-chord wonder, and I think even the same chords in the chorus and the verse.
Yes.
The chorus had just a little bit more intensity in the vocals, but it was the same 3 chords
and harmonies.
All the way
there were more harmony in the chorus as well.
Add the vocals to it.
Could be a Motown hit almost.
Yeah, and then what? Sorry,
Motown.
Oh yes.
But that's
I can't say that. But
it's a conversation for another time. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, and then and but lyrically, I think it was like I think both sides of the record. It's basically. It's just the same as the 1960s thing or the punk thing, which Acid House was the same, which is, I think, the straight society and the mainstream society that you're being set up for is a load of shit. So let's invent some type of alternative and we'll build it around, whatever the musical explosion is at the time. And it's about, just refusing to follow the path, and then calling people to come and join in the revolution. But it's about having disdain for people who won't join. You'll work it out somehow. I think I know it now. You'll work it out somehow. That's the chorus. There's this sort of
the yobbos in their panel vans just can't drive to the moon.
The moon. That's right.
Yeah.
But the other thing with lyrics was that we would just, sometimes with the music too, a lot of it was just first impressions. You write down the first thing that came into your head.
Yeah.
And that's what it'd be. We wouldn't.
Yeah.
If someone else would suggest something different, I'd change it. But I never wanted to change it. Every lyric I ever wrote was the first thing that came into my head.
I'm a bit the same. I mean, I always remember New Order used to talk about lyrics as, they're just another instrument. They actually don't really mean anything. As I've gone on, and as a songwriter, I don't agree with that at all anymore. I think the best songs do have meaning, and that to be accessible to people, they have to have meaning and tell stories.
Anyway, but I mean,
get into that.
If the first thing that comes out is done with intent, it will have meaning. It doesn't mean that it's
of course. I agree. But I think it was just not quite the same focus for us. But we still expressed ideas in other ways as well. And I just want to talk a little bit here about the difference between the remix, which is on the Drinking on Mars, I'll come to, compared to the original version. Well, maybe I'll have to make this original version accessible somehow. But I'm just remembering on the other day that, again, Know It Now was quite a long, rebel anthem, slightly punk rebel anthem with the techno bass. But it had a really long recording of Timothy Leary talking about turning on, tuning in and dropping out and getting shot and going into the heart of the sun. And that was a form of, lyricism for us for that track.
Well, in fact, if you'd have to listen very closely, but in the final instrumental section, that was another kitchen sink section where we just, make the guitars get louder and louder. The bass riff is, it's almost like a bass solo in there that gets more intense. They weren't even samples. We just get a cassette of something and just press play and then add it to a spare track. So we had Timothy Leary, we had Morrissey talking about the Moors murders. We had there was an excerpt from The Voice of Energy by Kraftwerk on the radioactivity album.
Oh yes.
I can't remember what else. But those sort of little, and it's like this chatter that's going on, like in the background, and they're all the things that we really liked. It sounded cool.
So it might be incongruous that we're talking about all of that, and that's not the version that's going to be on the album, the release Drinking on Mars, because that's the remix. But I do like the remix because of the way it's been produced, and kind of it's a bit sparser and takes away a lot of that the stuff that we threw in there. But it really is stripped back and spare to sound like more like Kraftwerk. As I've said before, Kraftwerk Trans-Europe Express, but just with drum machine and delay, and it's very machine-like and driving in that way. And that I think, listening back to it, it's really I'm really glad to have that, because Kraftwerk were such a huge influence on us as musicians and as a band, even though it may not have always been so obvious, but it's definitely one of the top five, let's say.
Well, go back to Red Planet, and the Kraftwerk influence should be completely obvious. But the thing about the remix, the thing about the remix was that, so our friend Jeremy, aka Dr. Sex, it was also,
big in Warrnambool. Now I hear.
Yes. He's a pillar of the community in Warrnambool now. But he was always extremely creative and eccentric in his musical ideas, and I think he brought that to it magnificently. And I think you try and take things to the edge as far as you can, and I think Jeremy took it further, and which was great.
In fact, of course, this is one of the things I love about the remix, and tell our listeners out there to listen out for it. The Melissa Couts sample in the Know It Now remix. This is highly amusing, I think. Read my lips. Read my lips. Do it.
Yeah. And then the video I've got to take credit for the video for it as well. I think all the Spaces Ace videos are mine. Have you made any Spaces Ace videos? Or they're all mine?
I have not. I have not made any Spaces Ace videos. So that's, but I did ask you to do all of them because it's a collaborative medium, and in the efforts of getting it out there and getting something done, I knew you would be able to do them a lot faster and would enjoy doing them immensely. I think for this first release, I did the Big Score Part 1 video, which is really just one shot of stock footage, and it's a 1-minute song. So that's my first contribution to this tranche. I'll do the cultural development. So, but just to wrap it up, I think yes, the videos you'll be seeing a lot of videos cut by John on this and other people, and we'll be hearing more Spaces Ace remixes from Dr. Sex in the weeks and months ahead as well. I guess that's probably about it. John, any last words before I wrap it up? We'll hear from you again, of course, in coming episodes.
No, I'm very much looking forward to all the music rolling out, and
Yep.
I think it's this early stuff. It's it's raw, it's rough and ready, and
Yep.
it's very, very exciting to hear the evolution as it rolls on into the modernist with that fantastic smooth,
Yes.
sophisticated sound, and the technology and the resources and the band.
Yeah, it's as much a history project as a musical project, I think, as I've delved into it as a personal, a personal story as well. But I hope it becomes out as a larger story as well, as we get more voices to talk about the times and their memories and experiences. Just one final thing sorry, go on. Yep.
I was just going to say that obviously there have been, probably a horde of people who are involved either in other bands that we knew, or people who lived in Canberra at the time and maybe came to see us, and in that whole scene, and people that you've completely lost contact with. But
that's
I
right.
I hope they get to see it and hear it, and remember some of their own good times from the 80s and 90s and beyond.
And would like to volunteer to come on Drinking on Mars, the podcast, and be a guest, because I think to wrap it up, finally, that you said something about what this project is, and you kind of, I jokingly say it's my project of self-aggrandizement and importance. And you said at the beginning, telling the story of how Spaces Ace was formed, where you said, you recollected that I said to you, you need me, I'll come down and join the band. However it happened. But that's kind of my lot in life with all of these bands. Is that I may not be the greatest musician or the greatest songwriter in any of these bands, but I had the greatest hunger and desire to actually make it happen. So that's what I do. I create the space that allows everybody to do it too, and we can all do it together. We can all, have a good time and create our own narrative and our own culture, and not leave it to the likes of our heroes or corporate behemoths or other people. We just, we loved it so much that we would have to get in there and do it ourselves. And I guess I'm still doing it. You're still doing it too. And I know there's lots of other people out there that are still doing it. Drinking on Mars. So with that, Jonathan Flynn or Jonathan F, thank you very much, and we'll speak to you again. And goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time in Drinking on Mars.